So if you want to explore NSString more, like I said before, you can either click on the NSString word itself and then click NSString class reference, and that will give you all of the methods that are available to you in NSString. So these are just an example of what you can do with the NSString class. Next, we're going to look at NSArray. Okay, so what's an array? Well, an array is a collection of objects. So, for example, in your iTunes library, you have probably more than one song, and in a given album, you will have probably more than one song. So you might have 12 songs in an album. So those 12 songs could be collected together as an array. In other words, they're in the same bucket of information. Okay. So the class name is called NSArray. So if we want to create an NSArray, we start by calling the class name and then create a pointer. Again, you can call it anything you want. And like we did with the instance of our class last week, we use the methods alloc and init. Now last week we just called alloc and init like that, but often with these classes there are ways called convenience methods that allow us to initialize the array with objects immediately. Okay, so here you can see there's a range of initialization methods with something else, and the most common one is init with objects. So in other words, initialize the array and put these objects into the array straight away. Okay, so that's the one that we're going to use. Now the data type that the array is expecting is ID, and that's a generic data type. So it could you can place into the array NS numbers or NS strings or lots of different types of objects. So we're going to use a bunch of strings. So as you know by now, string starts with the @ and then inverted commas, and we're going to put some names in separated by commas. So John, Paul, George, Ringo, and we can't forget Eric. Okay, and to close off the method we need the closing brackets and then the semicolon. So there we have it. We've created a pointer, we've created an object or a pointer to a place in memory where the object is stored. We've allocated that memory, initialized it, and we've immediately put into this array these 5 string objects. So now we can do something with this array. So the first thing that we're going to do is simply see if our array does actually contain those 5 string objects. So we're just going to do a log call and call back my array. So if we run that, okay, and down here in our console we can see that by calling my array, it has written to the console all of the objects that are in our array, which is what we told it to up here. So we've confirmed now that our array does in fact contain these 5 string objects. Okay, one of the most common methods associated with arrays is called object at index, and we're going to look at that now. So we're going to nslog again. Okay, and the method called object at index, what it does, it will return to us, it will give us back the object at a particular index number. And as I said before, the index number is, when I talked about it up here, is essentially the sequence of objects. And in arrays, the index number starts at 0. So the very first object in your array will have an index number of 0. The second will have an index number of 1. The third will have an index number of 2. Okay? So we can call my array object at index, and it's expecting an NSU integer. So in other words, a whole number. Okay? So if we call number 2, that will be equal to the third name. So 0, 1, 2. So it should write to the console, the third name is George. And there we go, the third name is George. So it's this particular method, object at index, has read all of the objects in the array and then counted 0, 1, 2, and it's returned to us the object that is at index number 2. And that's a really common method, and you should get used to calling this method. And when we later on in the course, when we look at tables, scrolling tables, object at index is a common method that's used in UI tables. Okay, the next method that we're going to do, which is also used in tables, is the count method. So again, we're going to do nslog. There are %i names, and then we're going to call my array space count. Okay, and as the name suggests, this just counts the number of objects in this array. So it's going to say there are, and it should be 5 names. And there we have it. There are 5 names. Okay, so that's the count. And count is used almost exclusively in a UI table to return the number of rows that you want to show in the table. So if you have a song in the iTunes, in the music app on your iPhone, and you scroll to a particular album, and then you select that album, and it lists all of the songs that you have in that album. There might be 6 songs. Well, in order to know how many rows to display, you will more than likely access an array that has the names of all of the songs in that album, and then you will use the count method to count the number of songs in that album, and then display the equal number of rows, so 6 rows. Okay, so that's a really common method associated with arrays. Okay, let's do another one. And you can probably guess what I'm going to call here. My array and there's a method called lastObject. Oops. Okay, so the last name is, and it should be Eric. Okay, there you go. The last name is Eric. And one final method to look at. So what if you want to know the index number of a particular object? So in this case, we would like for the method to return to us the index number of the object that has the string Ringo. So it should be 0, 1, 2, 3 should be returned to us. So the method myArray index of object, and it's asking for the data type of ID because it doesn't know what type of objects we have in this array. So but we are using strings. Now this string has to match exactly to this string. So if we were to use that, a little r, it would probably not return anything. So let's run that. Okay, Ringo is at index number 3, which is correct. 0, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so that's all of the NSArray methods that we're going to look at. But as I said before, if you click on the word NSArray and then come over here to the reference link, click on that, and that will give you the NSArray class reference. And scroll down to the tasks section, and it will give you all of the methods, for different types of methods for creating arrays, initializing them, querying them. Okay, we've used this one here, count, lastObject we used, object at index we used, different ways of finding objects within your array. Okay, and as you can see, there's a lot of methods there that you can explore. Okay, the final class that we're going to look at is this NSMutableArray. And what's the difference between NSArray and NSMutableArray? Well, the NSMutableArray, you can change what's inside the array. So you notice that when we created this array, we placed these string objects into the array, but then we didn't do anything to that array. We didn't make it smaller, we didn't make it larger. In other words, we didn't add any names to the array, we didn't take any away out of the array, we didn't insert any objects in between objects already in the array. Okay, so that's the fundamental difference between an array and a mutable array. The array, once you've created it and put some objects in it, you can't change it. The NSMutableArray, you can add objects to it, you can take them away, you can insert new objects at any place within the array, and that's what we're going to look at now. So like we did up here, we do exactly the same for NSMutableArray. So NSMutableArray, give it any name you want. NSMutableArray alloc init. Now, like last time, we could use init with objects, this method here, but I'm just going to use init because I'm going to show you another way to add objects.